We're going to discuss today air travel in the age of pandemics. And I'm just going to dive deep into this, straight into this, just a sec. Yep, we have it. Going over a bit of numbers and just really getting up to date in terms of the current COVID-19 situation worldwide. So far, we've seen almost 9 million cases worldwide. The death toll is around 470,000 individuals. Almost 4.7 million have recovered, sorry, a bit over 4.7 million have recovered, and we're still dealing with 3.7 million active cases worldwide. The most active centers still are the United States, Brazil, Russia, and India. So very much still global, still very active. For the ones of us that thought that we're behind this. Really, to just get a bit of perspective, I want to reflect over some pandemic history. We didn't prepare this infographic. The guys and girls and at the Visual Capitalist prepared this, really a great one. But I want to go back as early as the 14th century to the Black Death. The Black Death infected almost a fifth of the world population at the time. 200 million individuals passed away due to the disease. And this pandemic took 10 years to spread globally from Asia, making its way worldwide, mainly relying on traders on board ships. Moving on to a century ago, a bit over a century ago, the Spanish flu took almost 2 years to spread globally. The origins are not very known, but are still debatable. But the spreading factor are very much known. And these were soldiers that were sent to fight in World War I. And pandemic, like I said, this one took less than 2 years to spread globally, which brings us to COVID-19, which is now flickering on the bottom side of your screen. COVID-19's numbers are far behind past pandemics, as you can also see here on this infographic. But what is amazing is the quick spread rate. And COVID-19 took a mere 4 months to spread from Asia globally. Now, if we attribute previous cases to soldiers being sent to war or traders on board ships, the quick spread rate of COVID-19 could be is very much attributed to one thing, and that's globalization. Now, globalization and aviation go hand in hand, and what we're seeing here is actually a flight route map of 2019 in pre-COVID days. So it's really no surprise that the air travel industry, which had a big role in promoting trade, in promoting e-commerce, in leisure travel, open skies, you name it, would be affected so much when we're comparing it to other sectors. So really, since the beginning of the crisis and the outbreak, we've seen a vast decline in flight volume. So really, we're seeing so far a 70% decline in flight volume globally, 35% decline in cargo capacity, and we've seen over 20 airlines that have actually suspended operations 100%. Now, here in our crowd, we work closely with airports and airlines, and we've actually heard the same numbers. So even the ones that didn't suspend their operations by 100% are now down by 90 to 99% decline. Now, the aviation industry is really no stranger to crises. Really not going as back as the 14th century, but reflecting over some more recent history since the early 2000s, the 9/11 events, the SARS outbreak, and the 2008 financial crisis have all had vast implications on the aviation industry. Now, the key difference here is, of course, the aviation industry rebounded and got back on track. But what we've seen is what we see as a key difference between those situations, those crises, and the current situation is the difference between acceleration and transformation in terms of innovation. So acceleration is the increase in adoption rate of existing technologies for a given sector. Now, a good example for acceleration would be post 9/11 days, where additional security layers were introduced, additional security measures, better yet, like the magnetometers, metal detectors, where we stand with our hands up there and get screened 360. This was an acceleration of an existing trend of security. What we're seeing now with COVID-19 is transformation. Is the trend of transformation. Now we're talking about an application of a completely new technology or technologies to the sector in a post-COVID reality. Now, when we're really, if we really want to understand what this transformation entails, the transformation entails the change or the transition from security to biosecurity. Now, if we're talking about biosecurity, if the term biosecurity sounds familiar, you're probably familiar with the right-hand side of my screen. The right-hand side of my screen with the images of the forms that we need to fill, the sniffing dogs, and even signs throughout the airport that that basically ask you to dispose of any kind of meats and vegetables or foods or even materials from natural materials that might be endangering to the agriculture ecosystem. Now, biosecurity, in the definition of it, it refers to a set of preventive measures designed to reduce the risk of transmission of infectious diseases in humans, animals, and crops. Now, as I said, the focus it was very much on the latter two parts, animals and crops, and not as much on the human factor. So what we've seen so far, and again, the images on the right-hand side of the screen, tackled agriculture, animals, processed foods, and medicines, and mainly using measures like X-ray, sniffing dogs, and governmental biosecurity reps that usually checked suspected baggage, for instance. This brings us to Biosecurity 2.0, which is much more focused on the human aspect of it. Now, this is not something that we came up with. This is all originating from materials and new regulations coming from the IATA, the FAA, and the World Health Organization, which are all leading regulators for the aviation industry. And what we're seeing now is that the human factor is now it gets a light shined at it, and the new focus is immunity passports, screening for symptoms, screening for temperature, disinfection of individuals, and sanitagging of their baggage, which means actually, in other words, disinfection of your belongings before they board the plane, and tagging them to make sure that they keep sanitized throughout the journey. And of course, as we all know, the need for social distancing and enforcing that in the airport is still very much relevant and would keep being relevant later on in the future. Now, the measures in order to enforce those focus areas will transition completely from using dogs and governmental reps to applying AI, artificial intelligence based technologies. So the advent of AI brought forth computer vision, contactless sensing, autonomous robots, multi-layered bioscreening. These are all technologies that were not available even 5 years ago. So really, it's a good time to fight COVID-19. So this brings me to the Israeli ecosystem. Now, the Israeli ecosystem, the key trend that we've seen in the Israeli ecosystem is that all startups are now all hands on deck, so to speak. So of course, the healthcare ecosystem in Israel has been very much well poised to deal with the current situation, but surprisingly, startups from ecosystems such as mobility and automotive, cybersecurity, drones, semiconductor and optics have all pivoted their technologies in order to chip in the fight against COVID-19. This brings me to what we expect the new passenger journey, the future of aviation, to look like. Now, the way I'm going to share this with you is I'm going to walk you through a bit of the steps. Then we're going to highlight some companies, Israeli companies. Some of them are our crowd portfolio, and some of them are just ecosystem companies that we would like to highlight. And at the end of this, I want to share with you a landscape map that we prepared in our crowd to really cover all of the relevant companies in the Israeli ecosystem. So starting with temperature control on the left-hand side of the screen, temperature control today is being conducted when your temperature is being taken while you walk into a facility. It could be an airport, it could be a mall, it could be a store, whatever it might be. But the future actually requires to detect or sense temperature as early as possible. So today there are Israeli companies that could sense your temperature even while you're driving in your car, driving into the airport. Later on, as you walk into the airport, now you're actually accessing the airport, you will meet disinfection tunnels using either lighting or disinfectants, sprayable disinfectants, to actually make sure that you're not bringing anything with you, anything contagious with you from the outside to the airport. The third step would then be multisensory screening. Multisensory screening is just a walk-through device that actually senses key biomarkers and key symptoms, markers of symptoms in order to make sure within a second or two whether or not you're exhibiting any kind of suspicious symptom. If you happen to fail, it's not the end of the line for you. Then you will be taken to a separate room to get a bit more of an invasive test, maybe a blood test or a saliva test, like a nasal swab, that will not require you to wait 4 hours for a result like it is accustomed today, but you will receive a result within 1 to 5 minutes. So really, again, AI kicks in here. It has a key role here. Then, after you've been cleared to actually go on a plane, you will go into the self-check-in and sanitagging part of your journey, where it could be, this would be a kiosk. You probably hear it, the intention is to minimize contact with other individuals. So this could either be done voice operated or via contact, like touch screens, but a sanitized kind of screen. And of course, your bag, again, like I mentioned, would be sanitized in order to continue its journey. Later on, we will go through the the security measures now reinforced by AI. It would take less time to check your baggage. Then this means it actually prevents queuing up at the check-in, at the security check, sorry. Later on, when we go into the lounge, we will, in order to enforce social distancing, different sensors would make sure that people are sticking to the 6 feet or 2 meters, depending on where you're from, rule, and also make sure that we're keeping our personal hygiene so we don't infect other surfaces or stuff like that. Once we board the plane, of course, we might have flight attendants, but we might also encounter robots, but I will touch that in a bit. This is kind of a thought that we enjoyed. While we're getting back, you then meet border control, and border control now would probably be with a mask on your face. So even companies in Israel now today are able to detect, to provide you with face recognition while you're wearing a mask without the need to take it off. So really amazing technology. And of course, again, going through sanitation, disinfection tunnel, a multi-sensory screening, just to make sure that you're not bringing anything with you into the destination country. So that's kind of the main idea here. Now, after going through a bit of the journey, I want to highlight some of the companies that we found in the Israeli ecosystem and in our portfolio that are very relevant. Again, some of these companies are companies that have never dealt with medical technologies, but since the outbreak, they actually pivoted very quickly their technology to tackle this, and they are all pretty much advanced in the research and development stages, and some of them are actually very ready to deploy. Now, a company from the Israeli ecosystem, starting with the left-hand side of the screen again, temperature control. So I mentioned previously temperature control while leaving your car. UVI is an Israeli company doing inspection of vehicles originally. They now incorporated a thermal imager into their contraption that basically allows you to drive through it. And while you're driving through it, you and your passengers are being screened for temperature. So if any of you present any kind of high temperature over 38 centigrade, then you could already be alerted before you even walk into the airport. Now, as we walk into the airport, again, we mentioned disinfection tunnel. Juganu is a portfolio company of our crowd that developed a proprietary LED lighting. Now, their LED lighting is very close to the spectrum of the sunlight. It's like 97% similar to natural sunlight, and because of that, they can use the spectrum of the sunlight. Within that, there is the wavelength of UVC, the spectrum of UVC lighting. So unlike UVA and UVB, which are harmful for human tissue, and that's why we get sunburnt and skin cancer and other diseases that we don't actually like, and we wouldn't want. UVC lighting is not harmful for human tissue, but it is lethal to the coronavirus and other infectious diseases. Then we would go on to multisensory screening. Vocal Zoom, another portfolio company of our crowd, is actually a company that developed a contactless sensor that is capable of sensing heart rate variability, respiratory rate, and even take a voice sample for you and understand, according to your voice sample, based on your voice sample, if you are exhibiting any kind of lung condition, because COVID-19 is very much related to lung functions. Later on, in case anyone failed this, they would go to the secondary screening stage, which is there is a company that we are now investing in. We actually launched the investment just today, Flanimus, This is a company that is using a breathalyzer to provide you with accurate results based on AI and other kind of science, in order to detect the virus. And this is done within a minute. So really not waiting for hours. And this is done very accurately and very quickly, even compared to PCR tests, which are the gold standard for detecting COVID-19 and other infectious diseases. Going to the security phase, C2 is a company providing reinforcing security screening with AI measures, basically allowing you to not take anything out of your bag, just putting it into the screening machine and detecting while it's in there your laptop, and even if you're having, and if anyone had in there an explosive or weapon, it will detect all of it together. There is no need to take things out of your bag and queue up and hold up the line. Later on in the lounge area, a company like Vayar and Soapy would make sure that we're keeping social distancing, and these are Israeli companies, not from the Arcor portfolio, and keeping social and keeping personal hygiene. Vayar is a company that developed a radar-based solution to detect the capacity of a given room. Now this is radar-based, not camera-based. So really, this is not breaching any kind of privacy. You can put it anywhere you like in order to enforce social distancing, even in restrooms. Onto boarding. Boarding is probably the most known queue for any of us. When we're called to boarding, we're all queuing up at the gate. Now, Neura is a portfolio company of our crowd that is capable of pushing notifications at the right time, at the right moment, to really prevent queuing at the gate. So you would get a notification when it's your time to board and not anyone's else. And of course, on board the plane, companies like I mentioned before, Tami is a company, an Israeli company that developed personal robots that are capable of replacing flight attendants, possibly one day. Getting off of the plane, we will go through disinfection again and multisensory screening. No need to cover that again. But then we will need the border control. And in border control, an Israeli company called CoreSight, are providing facial recognition without the need to take your mask off. So even while half of your face is covered with a mask, they are able to detect your identity. And at the destination, companies like AirDoctor are basically providing you a connection to your doctor to make sure that you're keeping healthy while you're having fun. Now, I want to end with a note before we move on to the landscape map. What we get from here is that there is no silver bullet. This is the main takeaway from this. There is no silver bullet for the aviation industry. There is no one solution that fits all or one solution that can detect all. The key is a multi-layered approach to detect COVID-19 and also to make sure that the well-being of passengers and their health is maintained. So really just to end with, as I promised, the Future of Air Travel Landscape Map by our crowd. This is a very good representation of the current technologies that are available in the Israeli ecosystem to deal with the COVID-19 from the aviation industry and the air travel industry perspective. If you want to read more about air travel, if you want to read more about highlighted companies, I urge you to click the link that Estrella just shared in the chat box for our Innovation Insider. This is our thought leadership magazine. I have an article in there. I would love for you to join it, to read it and read about some of the highlighted companies. And really to end, this is my email address. Feel free to reach out to me with any questions, with any requests. I would love to be connected and see how can we maybe think about this together. So thank you everybody for joining us today. I would be happy to share the landscape map if you reach out to me. So really, thank you for joining us today, and thank you for, I hope you enjoy the Oracle Pandemic Innovation Conference so far. Thank you.